Hi, my name is Mike Pucciarelli, and tonight I'll be talking about light painting and how I do it in my still life photography. And so I do light painting differently. And I ask that you mute if you don't have a question, but if you have a question, unmute and ask. And I will also check the chat too. First of all, I'll give it a quick introduction of who I am. I started professional photography in 2010. I started as an outdoor photographer because I like to use natural light better than flash. And then I did portraits. And then I started taking still life classes, and I really love still life photography. And light painting is one of my techniques that I use for my still life photography. For those coming in late, this will be recorded so you can listen to it again. So today's agenda, we're going to, of course, talk about light painting, the information and the techniques that I use. I'm going to show pictures of equipment that I use. Some I bought from the store, but some I made. And then I'll show diagrams, light painting stroke diagrams. And I'm going to show camera setting diagrams. I'm also show pictures of my equipment, how I use the features on like the lens. And then I'm going to have a demo on Adobe Camera Raw. And then I'm going to have a demo with Adobe Photoshop. I'll talk how I use actions, how I group the actions to get quicker results, how I use blend modes with adjustment layers and filters. So I'm going to check the chat from time to time, but feel free to interrupt me if you have a question, just unmute. And you can always email me at mpucciarelli2016@gmail.com. And these are the images we're going to talk about tonight. These are all images made of several composites where you have like a blank master file, and then you have parts of it are exported from JPEG from Lightroom, and I copied it over and I pasted in the master art file. And there's ways to get lights. I use filters for the lights, and these all follow the same process. With light painting, there are many lighting modifiers you can use to soften the LED light with a LED flashlight. When I mean LED flashlight, I mean like a small flashlight. When I mean LED light, I mean a bigger light, and I'll talk about that later. Like for instance, you can create a snoot with white or black cards. You just use duct tape, and this is so you control the light better. And I recommend using white scrims, and all you do is put the scrim in front of the LED flashlight to light paint. This is great for light painting shiny objects. And you can also have plastic fusion scrims where you can go to an art store like Plaza Arts. You can buy like stretcher frames, and you can buy a plastic fusion scrim there or from online website. And both the white scrim reflectors and scrims are great for softening the light, great for taking out the unwanted glares. And you can also use, black cards to take out glares too. And then there's Cinefill. This is like black aluminum foil. So I've already started. Thank you. This is Cinefill. It's like black aluminum foil. It's great for softening the light. You can use duct tape. You can attach it to the LED light. You can use like maybe a spring clamp. Then you have like a foil pipe filter or a foil filter. And these are like plastic, some people call them PVC pipes. They're like, you can buy this at a hardware store. This is like a plumbing tool. And you just use a hacksaw to cut it. And you can also, then you connect it with duct tape, and I'll talk about that later. And then you use like a sand block to make it smooth, the edges. And then duct tape is great for creating, like, for a small LED flashlight. You can create like a tiny slit snoot if you want to soften a light to a very small level. And you can buy a lot of this at a hardware store and art store. You can buy some of this like the duct tape at like Safeway or a drugstore. There are many ways to add light in a dark background. You want to make sure you have a dark background. For indoor light painting, I recommend a small LED flashlight between 80 and 120 lumens. Larger lumen flashlights, probably like 3,000 lumens. I'd recommend like filters. I recommend filters for all the flashlights. But for the larger LED flashlights, I recommend like the scrim. You shine the light through here. And I'll talk about filters, the foil filters, the PVC pipe filters, the plastic pipes. These are great for putting on a flat LED flashlight. And I talk about how I use duct tape later. And you know how I use like the plastic fusion material with the strobe. You do the same thing. The strobe could be here, but since we're talking about light painting, the LED light will be here, and especially something is shiny. Or if you want to light paint from the top, this is also another like white reflector. The light will shine right through, but the light won't be so harsh. And I'll talk about filters and LED flashlights coming up. This is a bigger light. All this came in one package. I had to buy this separately, but this is worth an investment. And it also operates by batteries. And you can have gel colors, but I just use the top to soften the light. This is 216 LED light lamps. This is a very powerful light. And the light is balanced at 56K, which is the temperature for daylight. You can use it with batteries, or then you have to buy this separately, but they're both good. And this right here is just a hot shoe thing for the flash, but you can put it here. And this is the power dimmer. If you want to lessen the light, make it less powerful, you turn the dimmer at a low level. And this is being recorded for those who came in late. And this type of light is great for like light painting a bike or a car. And this is a bigger light. It's a lot more powerful than the other light. And of course, the light is balanced to 56K, which is daylight temperature. It's measured in kelvins. And this power is composed over 600 LEDs on this. And this is like a diffusion sock to make the light softer. And all this came in the same package. And this, I always use it with the battery power, with the plug. There is a V-mount battery, but I never use it. And some of these may be more expensive than this. And this is where if you want to use this, you can put this in a car battery. You can put it on here. And this is great for like if you're in a dark city, if you want to light paint like a motorcycle or a big object. This is another light. This is a great LED light if you want to like light paint a motorcycle. And it operates on a battery. And it's a very powerful battery, and all you have to do is charge it up. And I recommend charging it, whether you use it or not, just to make sure you have enough electricity. And it's great for light painting a car. And this is the charger. This is another way to charge it. And you can buy this at a Home Depot. And the other lights, I bought this from BH. You can also buy this at Amazon. You can buy this at BH or Amazon. But this, I bought this at Home Depot, and it's a good light. This is a bigger light. This is great if you want to light paint at a distance, like a tree. And you could charge up the battery, and you probably should recharge this definitely if you haven't used it in a while. But you might want to recharge it if you haven't, just to make sure you have electricity, because it's a powerful battery, but you're using up electricity. And this is great for like landscape stills or like distance stills. And it comes with, a rechargeable battery, which is in here. And then the recharge is in here. But you can also charge this with your car battery. You put this in here, you put this in the car, the cigarette thing. But I never did that. I just used my electric in my place. And the big square battery, it's a long battery life, and it's a powerful battery. But it's used when you have enough electricity. You can do a lot of great stuff with this Maximilian 3. These are my non-strobe lights, and you could use these for light painting. And this is a great floodlight. And these lights are more powerful, and you have switches that can control. Every switch is controlled here. This is like a 5-socket. This is like the D5 socket light head. It does come with the softbox. And this is like the 7 socket, where the switch controls this. A switch controls these 3. So these switches control like the columns of light, but this is also good too. These are what I mean by foil filters. Some people call them PVC pipes, but some people use the word foil pipes, where you measure the diameter of the flashlight, and then you cut it at a slant with the hacksaw, and then you connect it with duct tape, and then you get like a sand block, and you smooth away the rough edges. And this is a great tool. And just a matter of measuring the diameter of the flashlight, and then you go to the hardware store, and it should fit in. And these filters are great, especially when doing something small, when you want to control the light so the image won't be overexposed. Now, when you light paint outside, you might want to try not using these, but if you're doing like an interior of a car, because you're inside, it's different. You definitely want to use these, but it depends on what you want to do. So I'll stress this again, that the more you control your lighting with these, LED flashlights, big lights, the filters, the scrims, masking in Photoshop will be a lot easier. But it's just a matter of, controlling the light. And all you do is put the filters, the foil filters, or the PVC pipe filters on the flashlight. And I'll show a diagram of this pendulum motion. You want to go back and forth. You want to light paint from the side to bring out the texture. And if you want to emphasize more light, you want to go slower, like if you want to bring out more texture. But then you want to go quicker to emphasize less. But you also want to put some shadows in the photograph to make it interesting. And you want to think of the direction of light. Some people just usually use one direction. Some people use 2. I like to use 1, but sometimes, I do use 2. You want to make sure you shoot on your camera with a full battery. You also want to make sure the batteries are fresh in the LED flashlights or equipment to use, and that the batteries are fresh and have an extra set of batteries. And I always think of the edges when what you're trying to light paint. And there's ways to light paint glass. There's ways to light paint other stuff too. And I always use a cable release on the camera. Some people use a wire or remote. I recommend either, but I like to use a wired. And I'll talk about that later because it holds the camera still. This is what the LED flashlights look with the filters on, I mean, of course, the lights will look different, and you'll react differently. You'll paint differently, and you'll have, you know, easier control of the light. And again, you're making Photoshop's masking job easier because you're working with a controlled lighted image. You want to avoid overexposed image selections. That's why when you light paint something, look at your screen. Do you like what you see? You don't always have to look at the histogram, but just look at your screen. Or do you like what you see? And again, these light filters, you just light paint a lot better. And these are without the filter. See how harsh the light is? And again, when you control your light with the filters, masking Photoshop will be easier to work with because it's easier to work with a properly exposed image than an overexposed. And you benefit by using these filters much than not using them. And it just all depends on what you're trying to do. These are all my stands, and these are in concrete blocks. And I'll talk about concrete blocks later. It's one way to use a concrete block. Then you have a stand. Then you have, and the stands come with the bags. But these I had to buy at a hardware store. And these are all filled with rocks. I have like ground stands. I have medium-sized stands, bigger stands. I have medium-sized boom stands. That's where I use this. For the big boom, I could use either bag. I haven't bought stands in a while, but some of the prices have come down except for the big ones. But maybe the price will come down to them. I recommend, you know, the Manfrotto or the Impact. They're both good brands. And these are a mixture of, you know, Manfrotto or Impact stands. And Westcott makes good stands too, but I like the Manfrotto or Impact stands. And these are my silver reflectors. And since we're talking about light painting, you would take this off, you would shine the light through the white reflector. This is great for softening the light. In my other still life photography, I use this to bounce in light. But since we're talking about light painting, I shine the light through to make it softer. And these are my snoots. There are many ways to use this. In light painting, you could just put the flashlight. You can also cover this up to make the light smaller. These snoots are great for regular still life, but also light painting too. And there are many ways to use it. You don't always have to use it at 40-degree angle. You could just put the light here. And these are just crates. And sometimes you find these on the side of the road. I decided to pick one up. I picked one up on, you know, Brookside Gardens because it was just sitting there. It was a nice brown crate. So I decided to pick it up and put it to use, and I washed it out. And these are great for like holding like foam boards or collecting stuff. You can also put like a light on my other still life photography. And the same thing with the bucket. You could just rest like a board, like a foam board for a dark, like a black foam board for a dark background. Thank you for joining. I've already started. This is on recording, so I will post the recording. This is my homemade equipment where I make a lot of still life tables, all types of sizes. The small ones are great for doing jewelry. This is great for like a still life where you can put like a fabric cloth And I've used these many times. And they also have big ones too. This is a homemade rack. I used to have a piece of wood here, and it used to be storing the stands. I decided to make this use it better by taking it off, and now you can put like a Muslim background or a black background. And if you either make this higher, I could just rest this on a cube, and I'll talk about cubes very soon. This is a really helpful thing if you want to. You could even lean like a big foam board. So there are many ways to use this, and the poles extend out. They're cubes where it's great for storing objects, but this is like a great miniature still life table, either black, white, or just a regular foam board. This could really help build a miniature table really quickly. You can put a nice piece of wood to serve as a background, like if you're doing food. But you could also do the same thing with light painting too. I got these, cubes at Target, and these sell them. They're good. They really come in handy. This is a concrete block. We talked about how I store the stands in the cells, the holes here. This is also good when you stand it up. You can rest the foam board against a table, and this is a really good thing to have. And these are very cheap. They're like maybe almost $2 or maybe $1.50 a block, and these come in handy, the grooves. And these are homemade stools where the arms, the back of the chair was coming off. I thought about giving them away, but the place wouldn't take them, so I decided to bring them home, and I got a power saw and I cut this off. And these are nice stools. You can put a light here, you could rest a board, same thing with here. These are great for also creating like a small, miniature still life table. And these are my lenses, and this 24-meter lens over here is a great wide angle lens, and I recommend the prime because it's sharper and a lower price. And if you want to move in closer, you just move in closer. And this is a great 85. It's a great telephoto for something small. Now this is like a 35 meter is like a good standard. This is the 50 meter is also a good telephoto, and the aperture is all 2.8 and lower. And some of them I'll talk about that later. Some of them don't. And then sometimes you use my 7200 zoom. I also have an outdoor 100 to 400, but most of the times for still life, light painting, I just choose a lens like 1 through 4 here. I'm still using Canon. I may eventually switch to mirrorless, but things are changing. And you can use a mirrorless with these lenses. You have to buy something else. Now this is called image stabilization. Nikon calls it vibrant reduction. And there are several ways to use this. You want to make sure when you use a tripod, you turn it off. When you don't use a tripod, you turn it on. Thank you for joining. This is on a recording, so you can listen to any parts of it. I'm going to have links for separate parts. Now, if you use this incorrectly, your image will probably not process correctly. You could have a color shift problems. You could mess up the pixels. That's why, like I said, if you're using a tripod, turn it off. But if you're not using a tripod, then you turn it on. And it's a good feature to have, stabilization, and Nikon calls it vibrant reduction. The autofocus and manual focus, I use autofocus all the time for outdoor lighting. And for manual focus, I use it for light painting or for focus stacking. With, light painting, I do a pre-focus. I have it set to autofocus. I focus it, and then I'm happy with what I see. Then I change it to manual focus. And I do this because when you light paint, it's easier in the sensor. And the sensor won't have to think so hard because it's on manual focus. As long as you just make sure you don't move the camera and just use a cable release. These are my tripods. I also use it with camera stands, but I would always use ISO 100, but the tripod ISO 200. Without a tripod, maybe I could use ISO 3000. It also depends on how much light. Like if it's a sunny day, really bright sunny, then maybe I could use ISO 100, but then I have to really use a good narrow aperture and a very quick shutter speed. For light painting, I use a cable release. I always use a cable release. And to hold the camera really still. Or you could use a wired remote where it's not even touching the camera. You could just use a remote, but I always use a cable release. And I'll show what a cable release I use later. This is the camera stand. This is the cable release, and you can put a weight, those bags of weight to make it more sturdy. And again, we talked about the ISO, the same thing as a tripod. Do the same thing with a camera stand. Like I said, with light painting, I always use a wired cable release. And again, you can use, sandbags. You can use many sandbags to make it sturdy. This is my cable release, and this has been using this for years. A lot of times I use a cable release for my regular still light photography, and also all the time with my light painting. With my regular still, if I could just push the shutter very firm, but a lot of times I just use this, because you keep the camera still. So I recommend using what you want to use, what you're comfortable with. Just read the directions. But I recommend a remote cable release. Or you can even use your cell phone, your Droid, with technology exploding today, as a cable release. All depends on what you want to do and what you're comfortable with. This is the settings of my camera, and with light painting, I usually have the ISO 100, aperture 16, but this will say bulb, because you're going to be, what I do is I have a cable release. With one hand, I hold it. Another hand, I just paint with the LED flashlight. And I always shoot in manual mode. I always shoot in RAW. And the standard picture is the most sharpest. And evaluated mode is good for contrast. I just like to keep this at daylight, which is 52 or 56K. I can change the temperature. Make sure I have a full battery. I like to take one shot at a time. And the dry mode, which is here, is I like to use a zone autofocus. With a zone, it's easier when I do with strobes, also with light painting. And the zone autofocus is easier than the 19-point, because the 19-point AF is where the camera has to sometimes reset, and sometimes it's easier to use the zone autofocus than the 19-point AF. Some people like this, but I prefer the zone autofocus because you don't focus on one part of the photograph, but you focus on many parts. And in the 19-point, it keeps resetting sometimes. So that's why a lot of times, like I said, I just want to have the zone autofocus here. And the white balance, like I said, I always use daylight white balance because I can change this to 56K, I leave it 52, but I never use AWS, auto white balance, which is here, because it is the least natural. And these are temperatures of the other white balance. And a custom white balance is when you shoot a white card and then you set the white balance. And then you can also just set the Kelvin to what you need. But I always like to use a daylight white balance because it's the most natural. This is a camera diagram for the noise reduction. And it's where some people they like to use 0 because they don't think they need to use the noise reduction. But the properly exposed image, that's true, but it won't hurt if you use 1 or 2. I always like to just use 1 because something may happen, something may not happen. But then when you use 2, the same algorithm happens and it'll take longer to get to the other screen. 2 is great for correcting, blue color cast. But early DSLRs had this problem, but today's technology, they don't have this problem. But if you need to correct some blue color cast, you could use 2. Again, some people may just use 0. I would either use, and this is the ISO noise reduction, where I'd recommend 2 or 1 or 0, but I would rather use 0 through 2 than to disable it, because it won't hurt if you use it. And it's better to use a setting than not to use it. It's the color space page where I like to start with Adobe 1998, but sometimes I could start with sRGB. But when you start with Adobe, you have 57 billion possible colors. But then when you convert it to sRGB for the web, then you're stuck with only 16.7 million colors. Then when you convert it to CMYK, you only have 16,000 possible colors. CMYK is great for printing, but some people, they like to work with ProPhoto, and that's like 281 trillion colors, but some of the colors are not recognized by the human eye. But technology is exploding where you may hear people talk about ProPhoto, and this is a lot you can do with this. It's also a lot you can do with this, the Adobe RGB. Then exposure bracketing, where I just like to use a regular exposed, 1 stop under and 1 stop over. I do that a lot, but I like to try to avoid using the 2 stop over and 2 stop under, because with the 1 stop over and under, you have more details in the file. This is a lot I like to do. But some people, you can use 2 stops. It just depends on how much light you have. But a lot of times, I like to use regular, 1 stop over, and 1 stop under. And this is, what I mean by pendulum going back and forth, but the light is aiming at a 45-degree angle. And you can probably, if this were a shiny object, you could put the scrim in front of here. And I can't use a foil filter. I don't have to. And this is with a very, small LED flashlight. And this is with a bigger light. And this is where you would want to put a big, white reflector. So this may be too harsh if you don't. And we could also make the light smaller by closing the barn doors. But you also, with the power dimmer, you make it less. You want to think, moving from left to right, you want to think use your object when you light paint. So the idea is the same, that we're, aiming at a 45-degree angle, and we're going back and forth. Now it's time for the Adobe Camera Raw demo. So these three images, we're going to talk about the master art file. It's where you have a blank exposure. Then you have solo parts. And so what I do is I select out my solos. I bring these in Lightroom. I put them here, but I cut them out. And then I put them here. So they're all in the same folder. And the same thing over here, where I have a master art file folder, I have a solo parts. I select out the ones I'm going to use. I go to Lightroom, I sync all the properties. I put the files in here, but then after I put them in here, I cut them. I put the files in here. These are all the JPEGs that I exported from Lightroom. The same thing over here. I have a master art file folder. I have a solo parts. I have a raw.
Picked it up anyway. I hit talk. I said, hello.
Oh,
Guy on the line
hi.
goes, hey, Bruce, what's going on? My name's Jay, not Bruce.
Hi.
I said, nothing much, man. What's going on with you? And he said, I'll tell you what's going on. I just got an email about the budget. It's supposed to be 15,000. Now it's 10,000. And I'd like to know what's up.
Can you please mute?
I got excited in my chest. I grabbed the steering wheel. I was like, okay, focus. Your name is Bruce.
Someone please mute.
It was 15,000. Now it's 10,000. No one's happy about it. That's all we know. That's all we know.
Can someone please mute? Okay. And then what I was doing is I select these and then I go to Lightroom. I put the JPEGs in here. I copy the JPEGs. I put them in here. So the master art file, it's from a raw file. And then the Photoshop. Now we're going to go into Adobe Camera Photoshop. Where what I do is I make a selection and then I paste it. And I always, what I do is I make it really dark with this layer. And then I have a swatch so it automatically turns gray. And what I do is screen, I do painting, then I change the color of the whites, and then I do overlay, do more painting, and then I change the blend mode of the soft light with the light. And this is just the clone stuff I don't like. Same thing, and make sure you're in the layer mask when you do it, is to make sure your opacity is 100% and make sure it's at gray, and you paint, do a good job with the first coat of paints. And then I change the color of the white. I just switch on the white swatch. Then I do overlay, do more painting. And then I do soft light, do more painting. And this is just, I convert it to a smart object. And this is where I put in filters and add in filters. So this is non-destructive editing. So I could change it. And I have a thing for the wall. Now we'll sing for the table. You can also make the opacity lower. Then I have actions where we're doing the Photoshop demo. Thank you for joining. This is recording. When I click on this action, I'll talk about the actions I use. When I click on this, this happens. When you say play action, it's calling another action. And then it's going to conditional. This happens or this. And these actions are all defined elsewhere. And the same thing when I want to sharpen, where I call this action, and these actions are defined elsewhere. Again, when I first do this, these actions are defined elsewhere, just calling, they're just being played. And then I just go in button mode. And then I do, like if I want to sharpen it, and I'm going to go F12. Master art file. And I'm going to open up some JPEGs. I'm going to make my screen smaller. And so what I do, whoops, I'm going to go back over here. So what I do is when I look for what I want to copy over, I look through the JPEGs. I also have the levels adjustment. So when I do this, I click on this, and a lot of it lights up. I already did that, but this is where I want to make it nice and dark. And so I go to my libraries. I do painting, and I change the color to white. Do more painting, but now I'm at a different, now I'm at white. Same thing. I change the color to gray. I'll go back to the screen blend mode. I do more painting. So I change the color of the white, but now I'm going to change the blend mode, do more painting in the overlay blend mode. And then I change the color blend mode to soft light. Make sure you're on the layer mask. Make sure that we're on. So I paint at a gray, color gray, screen blend mode. And I switch it over here. I switch the color of the white. I switch it to overlay, do more painting. Let's switch it to soft light. This is the edge of the cheese. Wait, this is there. So change the color to gray. Screen, do more painting. Change the color to white. Do more painting. I'm using an overlay blend mode. The opacity is always at 100. Make it the full effect of the brush. And then I change it to soft light, do the same thing. Now this is, I did this, put these in a group because first I'll go through the process. Do more painting. Then I go to overlay, do more painting. Then I go to soft light, do more painting. And I have a layer up here because I was trying to clone stuff out. So then I put this in a group, and then I duplicate the group. Same process. So I change it here to screen, do more painting, then change the white, do more painting, and I'm at an overlay. Opacity always at 100. Now the last, I'm going to end with a soft light to make it more flattering. Again, change the color to gray, change blend mode to screen, do more painting, change the color to white, just click on the white swatch, overlay, do more painting, and then do soft light, do more painting. Now I'm doing a white. And this same thing, change the color to gray. You want to change the screen blend mode. And then I change it up. You know, I just click on the swatch. I can also do this. But it's a lot easier if you just have the swatch. I just click the swatches. And I do more painting. Overlay blend mode. Soft light, do more painting. Now I just control what I want to see with making adjustments here. So what I just do is this, the wall. I can always readjust the filters. Just adding a light using Photoshop. Same thing over here, the table. So what do your eyes want to see? And then the actions to get this black frame. I'm going to switch out of button mode. This is what I use. When I click on this, it calls this condition, and these actions are defined elsewhere. The same thing with all the actions. And when I click on this, all these actions are gone. If I were to click on this, I call these actions. And if I want to dodge burn, I call this. I make changes. I call this. I call these actions. So these actions are defined elsewhere. Then when I click on button mode, I'll just click on buttons and things happen. It's a master art file. Just open up some JPEGs for. So basically, I use about 10 JPEGs, 7 JPEGs. I do the same thing. And there's, an action for this. I click over here. I click on this to make it color correct. And then, again, if I want to, like I said, I'm going to go to my libraries. I paint it. And I check on the white swatch. When I do it over here, the first coat of paint, I use screen. Then I do the second coat is when I use overlay, do more painting. And then I just switch it to soft light with white. Make sure in the masking part, the layer mask, so here, so I paint here, but now it's color gray, screen blend mode. Paint the first coat of paint, and change it over here. Do more painting, and do more painting. Swatches, so I just paint at, make sure you change the blend mode to screen, not light and screen, it's more powerful. Paint, then it change at the white. Make sure you're at the overlay first. You can try soft light, but I like to use overlay. So I'm going to use it screen blend mode, color gray, paint, change the color white, do more painting, overlay, painting with white. Again, I want to paint gray screen blend mode. And I want to change the color of the whites. Paints, more painting. Again. I'm going to do gray. And when I just use 80/80. 80/80. And that's a good color, gray. So I paint it, but then I switch it to whites. Do more painting. And I do more painting. So that's what I do. And again, I put this, convert to smart object. So this is non-destructive editing. I could change it if I like. Hello, Deborah. I'm just finishing up the Photoshop demo. This is on a recording, so I'll post the recording. So basically, it's like this. I just want to summarize how I use Photoshop and filters. I click on this, the auto, I already did that. But then I want to make this really dark. I click on this, and this is the first coat of paints, painted it well. Then I click on the white swatch. Do more painting. Then I switch the blend mode to soft light to make it more flattering. When I get this box, I'm going to show the actions where when I get out of button mode. See, when I call action, all this happens. When it says play action, the actions are found elsewhere. Same thing. This action, when you see the quotes, it's called somewhere else. Same thing with this. It's doing other things, and it's also calling other actions. So when I click on this, this is called in a condition. And I just click on buttons if things happen. And when I always save my images, it's already set quality 100, asks where to export. And I convert to sRGB because I'm posting to the web. So when I do this, it asks me, where I want to post it. So suppose I wanted to, let's see. Wrong action. I clicked on an action, all those actions happen. So I'm going to push F12, get back to the beginning file. So I finished my Adobe Camera Raw demo, Photoshop demo. And these are all my Facebook groups, my still life. I changed the name to the Still Life Fine Art and Photography Creative Group. It's going every day. Architect group. You can post any type of fine art here. This is now called F-Stop International Display. Sculpting a light. I'm helping someone run. It's another light painting group. In dramatic product photography, you can post a headshot. You can post a dramatic photograph of a product. These are my business links. I'm going to check the chat. I haven't done that in a while. Let's see. I don't see any questions in the chat. So does anyone have any questions? You can always email me at mputrelliart2016.com. You can always just send me a message to any of these links. Facebook, Instagram, Google, LinkedIn, Twitter. See these links? I don't see any questions in the chat. Let's look at any questions. All right. So no any questions. I think I'll just end it. Thank you for letting me. Maybe you could just thank you for letting me do this presentation. Maybe you could like and subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Excellent presentation.
Oh, great. I'm glad you liked it.
The first part of the presentation where you're showing equipment,
Yeah.
the latter part where you're doing the actual demo doesn't lend itself to a PDF, but there are some parts in there that would lend themselves to making a visual presentation using what is it, PowerPoint or one of these things, and where all your websites and the equipment would be an excellent addition to what you did.
Yeah. Well, this came from a PowerPoint. I changed it to a PDF.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to eventually do like a live demo where I'm thinking about experimenting with my cell phone where I can record it and I could just, from the cell phone, I could upload it and I could add text to it. I'm going to try that.
Okay. That would be great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks again.
Thanks. I'd love to speak to your group too if you would like, or other groups.
Okie doke.
Thanks.